Good evening. It's been some time since I've addressed the Sandom people, and so, as it is the end of the summer, I believe that this time is very appropriate not only to address the Sandom people, but also to focus on the state building for this winter. Behind me is the place where the future polytheistic shrine of the state of Sandus will be. It's rather simple, and again it is in a closet in the office of the Sôgmô. This past summer has meant for Sandus so that we can reflect back upon the culture of our state, the culture of the Sandom people, and seeing where we can develop ourselves. It's also been important because this was the summer where we finally addressed to many micronationalists the philosophy of our state and of our people. To many, the state of Sandus is a smorgasbord of various cultures and various influences. And whilst this is true, there is a central philosophy always in place in Sandus. And that was shown this summer by our attendance and our presentation at the Polynations Summit, but it will hopefully be shown in future articles, specifically this fall, where we will focus on the obligations and the citizen requirements of all citizens. This winter, I also hope to finally create some sort of oath that all Sandom citizens can adhere to. And it will be focused about the recognition that suffering exists, that desire, ego, fear, ignorance, and hatred create suffering. And that suffering can be extinguished. And then it will follow the right speech, right mind, right effort, right concentration, right livelihood, etc., that we can abolish our own suffering. But in addition to this, it also needs to be an autumn of state building. We need to focus ourselves again after this relaxed summer, because there wasn't any major issue really, no major conflict like last summer, and it was rather peaceful this summer. But in addition to these obligations that I'm planning on writing about this winter, I'm also hoping that we can finally focus on building up the identity of the Sandom people. In addition to this, I'm also hoping to liberalize what we define as being a Sandom citizen. Again, going back to the obligations, it's believing that suffering exists, that suffering can be extinguished, that suffering arises from desire, ego, fear, hatred, and ignorance. And that is truly what I believe is at the heart of Sandus. And I don't believe it should be, oh, well, Sandus is polytheistic, or it's against monotheism. We need to be open to as many people as possible, because, again, going back to the obligation, that is what Sandus is about. It's not about polytheism, it's not about history, it's about following that obligation. But going along with the concept and idea of state building, this shrine as well is something that will be very beneficial. To my left is the altar of the Buddha, and it can still be improved. In fact, I'm hoping that this winter, along with the polytheist shrine, the Buddhist altar will be improved as well. A fun fact, lately I've been doing more and more research because of this polytheist shrine about what sort of practices and rites were held at shrines. In ancient Roman houses, these shrines were called lararium, or lararia for plural, and there would be dedications to household gods, the Lars, or the family gods, the Penantes, and also the geniuses, as they're called, or genii, which is the literal spirit and manifestation of a family, or the head of a family. So what I've been focusing on are all the different instruments used. And thankfully, last night I purchased all of the instruments needed. Now all we're waiting for are the frankincense and myrrh to come, and we've also bought a statue of Athena. So those will go there. But we also need to focus on our Buddhist shrine as well. In addition to this, though, there also needs to be some sort of practice, some sort of easy daily practice. Many of us don't like to, sit down and do regular prayers at 7 o'clock p.m. and do them even for 5 minutes. So if there's really just a gesture that we can do, that will be beneficial. And I'm working on one for the polytheist shrine, and it's going to be based off the Roman sort of salute, religious salute known as the adoratio, or the adoration. And it's rather easy to do. To some people it might not make sense, but having researched it even a little, I can begin to understand what it entails. Essentially, it is a kind gesture between oneself and a god, or even a statue, or a symbol, or a place. It is just... Sometimes there are a few variations, but I'll get to those in a separate video. But all of these are what will make Sandus in terms of culture. A few weeks ago, or even last week rather, I made a video about all the various fields of culture that Sandus can finally begin to develop. And this is just one of them. Ceremonies. It fits into the role of ceremonies in culture. And so, as we begin to develop our own ceremonies, going away from what makes up Roman, Greek, or Egyptian ceremonies and religious rites, if we finally begin to create our own rites, then we are going to be more culturally independent and get along on this process of culturalization. I will also begin to write and talk more about this in terms of policy, what this will mean. And it's actually been a policy a few weeks in the making, ever since, about early August. And it's known as the Philia Policy. The Philia Policy, which means essentially love, essentially means in this respect love for a country, or love for your country, in terms of culture. And so following the Philia Policy, following realism and libera, which is self-advancement and self-defense, and of course realism, that's self-evident. But in addition to philia, these three things will help us create an independent and sovereign people. And so all of these things that we will be doing this fall will be structured and centered on this policy on the policy of Philia. And we will be focusing on our culture, on everything that defines the Sandom sovereign people. We've already created the Sandom Style and Language Authority, but we will soon be creating a penultimate authority known as the Sandom Cultural Authority. And it will essentially be a government body which hopefully will comprise all citizens, and perhaps even non-citizens, but territorial residents of Kremlin-Sandus and all the other provinces, that we can finally begin to develop a sovereign people in terms of culture, a nationally sovereign people, a sovereign nation, as well as a sovereign state. And we are working on that pragmatically, realistically, and finally we are doing that according to our self-defense, our self-advancement, and our love for our country. And so all of these policies and all of these ideas, which I've sort of just spurred on out, will be focused on this purpose. Anyway, thank you. I will hopefully put this all into more writing sense, but that's about it. Thank you.